It's Formula One Philosophy number 20. Sean and I have been doing this now for almost 6 months. More. 8 months. 7 months. 5 months? I'm just going to keep saying numbers.
He's going to get there eventually, people.
Thanks, Sean. Formula One Philosophy number 20. As always, F1_philosophy at Instagram. Please like our posts, share it with everybody, like our stories. We thank you for everybody who does that. F1philosophypod@gmail.com to join our fantasy league for the 2024 F1 season. I didn't check how I did. Actually, I totally forgot about that until just now. How did we do, Sean?
I'll need a second to pull it up.
While you're doing that, just keep in mind that Producer Gatsby cannot win. No matter what the cost, we cannot allow Producer Gatsby to win the fantasy league. He got a dog collar for me and Sean recently, and he put bitch 1 and bitch 2. He's getting really confident he's going to win.
I don't know why. He's in 4th place.
Oh, so one of us passed him?
Yes. Yeah. I passed him.
Oh, nice. Not me, though, right?
You just keep sliding down that ladder.
Mm-hmm. It's because I refuse to put any Haas. That's basically it. I refuse to put Haas or Austin Martin in my teams, and some weeks that pays off, and some weeks it doesn't. Like this week, did not pay off.
I'm going to go ahead and say it hasn't paid off, period, based on where you are in the standings.
Well, I also do the stupid thing.
6th.
So 6th and 7th, right?
6th and 7th, Nick. 6th and 7th.
I'm the Zhou Guan Yu of our fantasy league. And F1 Philosophy at YouTube. We are getting some traction on YouTube. We really appreciate you guys sharing, remixing our shorts, our videos, our long-form podcast. We want you listening in your car, listening at work, listening when you're driving to work, listening with your family, listening at home when you're trying to relax, and your wife comes downstairs and says, "I'm leaving you. I never loved you. And I've been cheating on you with the neighbor across the street to let him crush me. He's 300 pounds, so I can finally feel something." What do you think about that? You look her in the eye and you say, "Bitch, I'm trying to listen to Nick and Sean shit on Ferrari. Get the fuck out of my house."
Nick, are you doing okay?
We'll talk off microphone, Sean. Anyways, how was your week?
I have a feeling it was better than yours.
Hey, I don't have bad weeks. I only have awesome and less awesome weeks.
You say so.
Said the person crying inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
I think I might have to pay you a visit, clean out that safe.
I don't put anything in a safe, Sean. It's out there in the open. Anyways. Oh, I'm doing okay, I swear.
You say so.
Yeah. Actually, I had a good conversation at work again with someone we're going to probably have on the podcast soon from Count It Out and with Mike and Tyler. They talked about their best or their favorite top 7 Canadian albums of the 90s. And that was a pretty emotional discussion. Not heated, but like we got into it because like I was telling him mine. And yeah, shout out to Count It Out with Mike and Tyler. They do a wrestling podcast. We do a Formula One podcast, but they do some cool content like that every now and then. I'm thinking you and I should give a list of our top 10 favorite albums of all time. It'll be completely different and get the debate going. What do you
think? All right.
I think it's just something we can save for the upcoming summer break. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, sure. Why not? It's a long summer break and it's a couple weeks away, so why not?
Yeah, and based on the way the driver market's going, Carlos Sainz is not going to sign during that summer break. So he's holding up the market, right?
Yeah, we'll see. Just know that if this experiment of yours fails, it's all your fault.
Like most things. What isn't my fault on this podcast?
I mean, you want to set it up, so I'm just putting it all on you.
All right. You had a correction from last week, Sean?
Last week we talked about an engineer who was moving from Red Bull to Aston Martin, worked under Newey. You had mentioned that it may have been Cowell, and the name sounded familiar, so I went with it. Turns out it's not Cowell. Cowell that's going to Aston Martin is Andy Cowell, who's a Mercedes powertrain engineer. So he led the development of the Mercedes powertrain. He has left Mercedes and is now going to be the CEO of Aston Martin. So there is an engineer who worked under Newey who is going to Aston Martin. It's just not Andy Cowell.
Okay. What did we learn, Sean?
Don't trust Nick.
Don't trust Nick. You took the words right out of my mouth. I
feel like anybody who's listened to us could do that, but yeah.
I think your sister said it best. You wanna tell everybody what she said?
The comment about she agrees with your opinion, but ultimately she knows that I'm right. Something like that.
If you're listening, you nailed the whole point of this podcast. That was exactly what I wanted to get across to everybody. Follow me emotionally, but listen to Sean intellectually. I have a comment from last week. I got a little flustered. You'll remember during the discussion, and I edited it out when we were talking about Nico's 6th place in Austria. I just forgot to mention how much the media hyped it up and loved it, and I have no problem with Nico. This isn't me shitting on Nico. I would just like to point out how when Mick finished 6th, and when Mick Schumacher finished 6th, and he helped Kevin Magnussen get 2 more points in the sprint, his team and the media treated him like he had a very arrogant weekend. Like his team was saying he had a bad attitude all weekend, not saying, hey, he got proven right for making the right call. He was right about the strategy. He was faster than Kevin, and he showed it in the race. He was defending 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton for 10 laps in the sprint so that Kevin could score 2 points. And they treated him like crap, and you can just see the contrast with someone they love like Nico. Everything in Austria was perfect. With someone they hate like Mick, nothing's good enough. And all I want to say, the only reason I bring that up is to say I'm almost done talking about Mick Schumacher. And I'm almost done with therapy, our therapy segments. I started therapy as an idea that I had a lot to vent about Formula One. But with the way Formula One's going, it's becoming so good and so competitive, and there's a lot to be optimistic about. Sean, you're an excellent therapist, by the way. You've really helped me realize how good this sport is. I've fallen in love with it in a way I never thought I would. So I don't really want to talk about Mick Schumacher anymore, and I have one more therapy in me talking about him and one more therapy shitting on Ferrari one last time. And I imagine by the summer break, you will never hear me doing crazy rants again. So that annoyed me last week, but you know what? F1's too good to care about this crap anymore. It doesn't look like F1 wants him in the grid, in the paddock. He's always the last choice. He's never anybody's first choice, so I'm just going to stop talking about him and just go with my original thesis that F1 doesn't like the Schumachers. End of story. Thank you for letting me rant about that, Sean.
Well, I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough. I wouldn't call myself a therapist because I'm not. This is mainly informal guy talk with zero credentials and wildly erratic results.
I'm going to take a picture of your therapy or psychology degree and post it to the Instagram account It's totally not fake, everybody. Totally not fake. Okay. Are we ready to talk about Silverstone? What a lovely race. Winner.
Simply lovely.
Simply lovely. Yeah. Do you have any first thoughts on it before I get us going on my crazy snowball down the hill?
No. No, you go ahead.
Lewis Hamilton, man. That was a drive. That was one hell of a drive. As someone who
It was.
Yeah, who's someone who craps on him as much as I do, like, wow. I got to shut my mouth this week and just say, like, he nailed it. He's faster than George. Yeah, he got helped by Red Bull fuck-ups and severe McLaren fuck-ups, which we'll talk about soon. But that shouldn't take away from the fact that he was, like, steady, there, never out of the running, always had everybody within arm's length, and then when he was given the opportunity, he ran away with it. It's almost like he's a 7-time world champion or something.
Who would have thought that someone who's won 7 times actually deserved to be there? I know we've made our comments about him, but yeah, I mean, it's clear he still has it.
If anyone deserved a "I never left" on the radio, it was him. Because we're going to talk about him later probably, but Daniel Ricciardo definitely did leave. Lewis didn't. Lewis had his struggles, but like this weekend, I think is going to do great for his confidence. This is what we talked about a couple months ago, saying that if you want to go into Ferrari and actually turn Ferrari around, you need some confidence and you need to be the best you can be. And I think he might be on the verge of turning his season in that direction.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because just prior to starting our chat here, I listened to F1 Nation, and Alex Verts brought up the same topic, that when Lewis was still at McLaren, he was kind of walking down the paddock and staring in the Mercedes garage, checking out how they were doing when Mercedes wasn't doing very well. And Wirtz at the time got the impression that Lewis was already out the door at McLaren, that he had signed, before it became official that he had signed, and he was looking to this team that wasn't doing well and trying to figure out what was going on. And then lo and behold, we come into Lewis at Mercedes and the team turning around, not necessarily because of him. And he brought that up basically to say, like, Lewis is still there. He still has it. And he seems to be doing the same again. So even with all the Ferrari nonsense that's going on, I don't want to put hope out there, but maybe there is a little bit of hope.
Only in terms of, like, could history repeat itself? It's very coincidental.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, sure. I stipulate that. I know you've already implied that, but I stipulate that to say that Ferrari does not equal Mercedes. Ferrari 2024 does not equal Mercedes 2012. Ferrari's going down. Mercedes at that time was on an upward trajectory. Slow, but upward.
I mean, you could argue that Ferrari's on an upward trajectory, one race to another, but they're also on the downward one race to another.
Well, now
the inherent inconsistency that is them.
Yeah, but like now it's 4 in a row. Like Sainz has reverted to his 5th place unless there's 2 DNFs in front of him. And Leclerc's reverted to I'm at Alfa Romeo circa 2018. So
yeah, pretty much.
So I don't. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't. I don't know if I want to compare those two as much as for Lewis fans, for Ferrari fans to give, like you said, to give them some hope. I would love to, but it seems like 2 different scenarios. Yeah, Ferrari's inconsistent week to week, but the inconsistencies don't just go away. They seem to rot for a while, and then they maybe have a tiny renaissance at times.
No one's arguing with you. I'm just saying Alex Wertz put that out there, and it's an apt comparison. But like you said, it's likely just coincidental.
Yeah, I just say that because, like, I don't think Lewis will ever cancel his contract, but he has to be more scared than originally thought. Like, you and I stipulated he should be nervous. Now he needs to be nervous looking at Ferrari. Because he still has it. Doesn't look like they do.
Okay.
I was just hoping you'd have more of a comment, but okay.
No, I mean, I brought it up just because it was topical to how you introduced this portion of the talk, but other than that, I have no real input on that.
Well, as you say, we'll see. We will see.
Exactly.
Poor George. Do you think he comes second? If not for that issue.
What do you mean by come second?
Does he? Because he was passed by Lewis. There was a little bit of hanky panky, and by the way, that I think it was lap 26 when 4 of the cars were fighting each other within a second. What a sequence of events! What a sequence of events that was, and you saw.
You mean, yeah, where they came back on in front of Norris?
Yes, and Norris passed George, Lewis passed George, and then Norris passed George, and then George took back Norris, and then Piastri was in the mix, and that was just fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm. No, it was great. A lot of action this weekend. But to answer the question, does George come second in the race without that problem? I don't think so.
Interesting.
I don't think he does. This is, it's almost like the Lando curse. I think George is suffering the same sort of fate. And obviously their coincidence is non-existent. Everything kind of happens. I don't know how I'm trying to say this. I know how I want to say it in my head, but it's not coming out. Never mind.
Coincidence.
I think George would have fucked it up for himself.
Oh, coincidences notwithstanding, I think is what you were trying to say.
No, not at all.
Okay, whatever. George fucks it. We'll cut that out. George
fucks it up for himself.
You make your own luck, right?
So, yeah, sure.
So at some point, I think Norris is mentally strong enough from what we saw, that interview you pointed out last week, the F1 Nation interview. Not F1 Nation, the Beyond the Grid.
Mm-hmm. Beyond the Grid.
Beyond the Grid. Mentally, Norris has it to overcome this. Not bad luck. It's definitely, like we're about to talk about, self-inflicted. But he has the ability to make his own luck go the way he wants it. Like you see with Verstappen this weekend, no business being in this race for the win. I was texting you, I'm pretty sure he has a severe problem. He's going to DNF. And then 10 laps later, he's within a second of Lewis Hamilton. Like, you make your own luck. You keep yourself in there with your will, with your strong mind. You know what I mean? Like, Norris has that. Max has that. Yeah. I don't know if George has that. And that's a good point you make. Yeah, he would have fucked it up another way.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like, I don't know, because how many times has he started on pole and not won? And you mentioned it last week. He started on pole in Hungary and didn't win. And if you believe what all the commentators say, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Barring what we saw a couple of years ago where half the grid got into an accident corner 1, and then we had some clusterfuckery on tires that had Hamilton out front on the grid on his own. Barring that, if you're on pole in Budapest, you're pretty much guaranteed the win. So for Russell to be there and not get it, and I can't remember the race, but that is indicative of all the pole positions he's had, really. He hasn't had many. He's had 3 or 4, something like that.
He's at 3, yeah.
And he's got 2 wins, and neither of them came from pole.
No, the only one, like before Austria, was Sao Paulo 22. He won that race from pole, but the Mercedes was just on it that weekend, and nobody else was. To your point,
Right?
It wasn't an amazing.
So he's got
feat.
1 from pole.
Yes, and
right.
You're right. Hungary too. I remember that race because I remember texting you saying that the Mercedes could have won if they were able to get rid of their fuel faster. Funny enough, the Mercedes was one of the fastest cars on the track in 23, and George still managed to mess it up. I don't even think he came on the podium, if I'm not mistaken. And so here, I'll look it up now. Yeah, to your point, it's just, this just might be who he is. He just might be that type of driver.
Yeah.
And funny enough, Michael Schumacher went through that too at his last year at Mercedes. A lot of problems, like he had a lot of good positions and then DNF'd with technical failures like George. But at that point, Michael wasn't Michael, right? He was around where George was.
Right.
So he wasn't able to make his own luck, and he was mentally out the door too. Not an excuse. It's just, it shows how important strong mind is in this sport.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, George Russell. As I'm looking this up, we can already make a correction in this episode. Everything we just said was wrong. Funny enough, it was Lewis Hamilton who got pole in Hungary 2023. Never trust Nick.
All right.
Never trust Nick.
Right.
We already said
so
that.
You know what that means, everybody? Everything Nick has ever said on this podcast about Mick Schumacher, Michael Schumacher, any of the old teams is completely wrong, and he shouldn't be trusted on any of it.
I want to say fuck you, and I will. Okay. Let's wrap Mercedes up in a bow. Is this just a blip? I know we asked that last week. Or are they legitimately now going to be in the discussion for a race win every week?
I'm not sure about every week, but they are legitimately fighting every week. So we can expect them to be there, but this is a testament to how close the field is now. We can legitimately expect 3 teams and 5 drivers to be fighting at the top.
Yeah, we'll talk about him
That's
later.
the truth, isn't it?
You're not wrong. I would even say 4 teams and 6 drivers. Sainz. But yeah, Sainz, I guess, is not legitimately going to fight for a win, but he'll fight for a podium. But
yeah, I'll give you that one. That's accurate.
But that was very funny. We'll talk him in a bit. Yeah, it's kind of just, I just bring that up just to say this. It's kind of gone unrecognized. Like not many people are mentioning that Mercedes has just won 2 races in a row. And I know the circumstances were weird, so they're just kind of dismissing it, but any team winning 2 races in a row, especially when it's not Red Bull, is a big deal. So they might be back.
Yeah. I think they're definitely there. And like I said, this is exactly what we wanted to see. It's the teams converging on each other, and everyone's understanding these cars a little better. Everyone's pushing the last little bits of available development scope. And we genuinely have, I would say, out of 10 teams, at least 6 teams that are capable of fighting, not necessarily for the win, but it's no longer, there's 2 teams out front and everybody else is just kind of squabbling in the background. There's legitimately 6 teams out there that are worth watching.
Question, is Aston Martin one of them?
Not anymore.
So RB then I know is your 5th. Is Haas your 6th?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, like you said, 2 races in a row for Mercedes, right? And 2 races in a row for Haas have been surprisingly good.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more. Sorry, go on.
But I mean, I threw 6 out there, but it might be 7, it might be 8 teams, right? Because on a good day, Williams has their ability to put something in, at least with one driver. Alpine has shown they can be up there now. Gasly had a poor hand this weekend, but they've shown that given enough effort, they can get 2 cars in the points, which frankly is more than Williams can say, and it's definitely more than Sauber can say.
Yeah, Sauber's not a team as far as I'm concerned, but anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we got off topic. What were we?
We were finishing.
We were wrapping up Mercedes.
I think we've basically hit the nail on the head. They're there, potentially. I think they have a chance to go 3 in a row at Hungary, but then they might fall off. I think what you're insinuating is they might fall off as the season progresses. Not much, but they won't be.
I'm not even saying fall off. We're going to see this level of excitement till the end, I think.
I hope so. Let's go to McLaren. Since they used to be the customer team, well, not customer, they were customers to Mercedes engines. What the?
They still are.
That's true. No, it's just not called McLaren Mercedes. They would be good to call themselves McLaren Mercedes because that's the last time they fucking won. They should have won all 3 of these races in the triple header. And they have, yes, some blame on Max Verstappen, but they have, outside of that, no one to blame but themselves. And
yeah,
it's very disappointing. Like, I know we talked about how this is their rattle Red Bull era and come strong for 2025. It's just, I feel bad in a sense, but also like you did it to yourselves. You definitely threw away 3 race wins, which is a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I told you, I watched a good portion of this race on board with Lando, trying to figure out exactly what it was that caused them to throw it away, because he should have been there.
Oh, yeah.
He should have been closer to winning that race, and it should have come down to the wire as to who crossed the line first. And it legitimately was the team not wanting to make a decision and leaving it to Lando, and him in the moment making the wrong decision. And I'll give him credit. He came out immediately after the race and said that exact same thing. The team made a mistake. He made mistakes. Altogether, the car is there where it needs to be. They need to stop making mistakes. I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically his comment.
Yeah, I saw that. And he was crushed. You could see the camera point to him at one point when they were interviewing Verstappen, and he's just leaning with his arms on like one of the podium stands, just his head down. He's like, I fucking blew it, and I knew it, and like I know it, and it's just, you got to feel for him in that moment. Like you can't turn back time. It was right there for the taking, like you said. It should have been down to the wire, and instead he was just a sitting duck for Lewis and Max to pass.
Yeah. And, when I heard that call, so watching the race live, when I heard the call from pit wall asking him, do you want the mediums to cover Verstappen or the softs to cover Hamilton? I was hoping that he would say the mediums because that plays into your theory that that mid-range compound works beautifully on that car. And I think he took the perceived ace and said the soft is going to make me faster, and I want that. I want to fight for the win. Therefore, I have to have the soft, which they were too many laps away from the end for that to work. And I think it was just an impulsive decision on his end in the moment that cost him that lead.
And it shouldn't be his impulsive decision. Like, yes, I applaud drivers making those decisions too, but like a lot of people have talked about, these cars are a lot harder to drive in terms of the technology in front of them. They have a lot to think about every time they're in the cockpit. Yes, I'm saying harder to drive in a sense, in that sense, technologically, whereas back in the day it was harder on your body. So they got a lot in their mind right now.
Yeah.
That's why they defer to their team for strategy a lot of the time. I realize that now. I think they needed more of an adult in the room between Stella and Brown, someone to step up and do their fucking job, be the authority figure that Lando needs in that moment, and say, Lando, the mediums are best for our car, and they have enough length to last the race. Whereas they already knew at that point that the softs, based on Zhou and who else had them? Zhou and I want to say Perez had to pit.
Hamilton.
Well, Hamilton had it at the end of the race. I'm talking about the beginning of the race. I think it was Zhou and Perez had the information from the softs, knowing that it could only last maximum 10 laps. I think Zhou went in lap like 11, and he was in last place because he was being passed by everybody. So
yeah, and I think the problem there was because the track was still damp, the soft should have lasted longer.
Oh.
But it didn't.
Yeah.
Right? The track didn't start off wet, it got wet. So in theory, all that data from the previous runs wasn't as valid as it could have been.
That's a fair point.
But I have another comment I think is worth bringing up. And this is another one from Beyond the Grid. They were a few weeks back. They interviewed Luciano Brutti, who was former Jaguar and Prost Peugeot driver, and then he went to a test driver role for Ferrari in the Michael days. And at that time, when they had unlimited testing, he was doing all sorts of tire testing for Bridgestone and Michael. And the data engineer who was in those test sessions with him was Andrea Stella. And in this interview, Luciano Brutti says, Stella is an amazing data engineer to the point where I had to ask him when was he in the car with me? Because he knew exactly what was happening. He knew exactly what it felt like just by sitting on pit wall and looking at the data. That's the guy that now runs the McLaren F1 team that failed to make a tire decision for Lando that cost him the race. So to your point, exactly, the adult in the room in Andrea Stella should have made the call to put him on mediums.
Yeah, because it's not like you said, it's not like you don't know better. Like, what are you afraid of in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
What was so terrifying is, should we start this rumor? Is it Zach Brown? Is he over the shoulder too much? Is he putting too much input and saying, hey, you have to listen to Lando? Because, why wouldn't they defer to him in that moment? Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I think you nailed it. And I've said it before. I'm not a huge fan of Zach Brown, but think about it. How many CEOs do you see at the races? How many CEOs do you see in front of the camera as much as you see Zach Brown? Because keep in mind, he's not the team principal,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's an unusual thing because they're pulling Zach Brown into team principals press conferences, but he's not the team principal. Stella is. And you do see it a little bit. They seem to be more flexible with it nowadays, but you see Peter Beyer at RB, but he's definitely not as vocal as Brown is. But none of the other teams, I mean, with the exception of Christian Horner, who is, I believe, the CEO of Red Bull Racing and team principal, you don't really see the CEO getting that involved. It's not his job to run the team. It's
Exactly.
his job to run the company.
Yeah, and stay out of the way in moments like this. Which,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I think the only other one I can compare to is Frank Williams. But I don't know if he was ever team principal.
Yeah, he was. I mean, up until he couldn't be anymore,
Yeah.
he was. But that's just the nature of Williams being as small as it was. But even when he wasn't at the races and he had pulled back, he was still running the company, and Claire was the deputy team principal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so
anyway, I think there's definitely something there.
yeah, and I hope it wasn't his idea to leave Oscar at a lap. What the fuck was that? Like, that's all I really have to say. Like, what the hell? Do you have any insights into that? Like, what the fuck was that?
It was both of them. Like, okay, Oscar got the short end of the stick because he was out there um, much longer, but they did it for both drivers. They left them out a lap too long on both stops, basically. But the thing with Piastri is they were running so close together that double stacking them didn't seem like the opportune thing to do. Right? They would have had the double stack on that first stop, which would have cost Oscar quite a bit of time.
2 seconds.
But I think it was still the right strategy. Right, and that's if Norris had a good pit stop, 2 to 3 seconds it would have cost Piastri, which sounds like a lot in the scope of what that race was. But look at where Piastri finished. Like, I think it would have been better for him to sacrifice those 2 seconds than it would have been to stay out that extra lap.
And I imagine he in that moment would have said the same thing. Oscar's bright. You hear him on the radio. He's usually in the right headspace for the right strategy. Yeah, he's young. He'll make mistakes, but it's very rare you hear him say, "Oh, I completely fucked this up." I'm positive. I didn't see his onboard, but I'm positive he said, "Let's just double stack," because he did let off. He let off a second, so I think he anticipated the double stack.
Quite possibly, and I didn't watch any of Piastri's onboards, but it's potentially he was warned that it might come and then eventually told not to. So Piastri is, like you said, he's intelligent and he seems to be on top of it. It almost seems like his internal clock runs faster than everybody else's, if you know what I mean. Like, his internal clock is running faster, so his thought process is in line with what he's doing, because he almost seems too calm in that car doing 200 kilometers an hour plus.
That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, like his calmness isn't the weakness that I originally brought up, that, oh, he's too calm, he needs to show emotion. No, he is. He's just naturally at a higher rev. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I don't know. You feel for him, right? In hindsight's 2020. It's just why not?
I
Like,
mean,
yeah, you're already in the lead. You might as well stay as close as possible. Like, well, yeah, like you're not. Lando's already leading. You're not playing favoritism at that point.
yeah.
Might as well just double stack them. That's what I'm saying. I just don't know what the thought process was there.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like they were on it all weekend. Practice qualifying, the two of them were neck and neck and at the top, and it didn't come together for them in the race because of poor calls from the team.
Again,
So
like
they, yeah, McLaren just needs to get on top of themselves and figure out what's going on. Now, they do seem to be relatively hard on themselves, right? We're not getting messages like, oh, okay, well, everybody did a great job. They're coming out and they're saying, hey, yeah, we botched that. That's our mistake. We need to do better, right? So they seem to be in the right place mentally. But whatever ended up causing them to make that decision now needs to be removed, right? And I'm not talking about people, just whatever thought process went into that needs to be found out and removed from the decision making process.
I watched a lot of videos, a lot of recaps today. So I don't know who to attribute this to because I can't remember. But someone said it was either Lavi S or Matt or P1's Matt and Tommy said McLaren's still acting like they're the underdog. And they need to start acting like they're the winner. Because they have the fastest car now. So you need to start acting like you're going to win. Not what should we do to keep pace with everybody.
Well, I'll counter that with another comment from Alex Burtz. He was saying that the fact that they operate as the underdog, kind of the new kids on the block, let's say, is what got them here. And they need to maintain that to be able to continue to push. So yes, they made a mistake, but if they change their approach and their attitude now, it's going to go the other way, right? They can't afford to be conservative and act like the winner. They need to continue to act like the underdog and continue to push and make those mistakes, because it's that finding the edge, right? Without knowing where the edge is, you're never going to be at it, right? You don't know where the edge is until you've gone over. And that's that mentality that I think McLaren has, as that underdog mentality, like you mentioned. And if they shift away from that, I don't know that it's going to do what you think it does.
It's a really good point. That's a fair counter, and now I got to reflect on that, because you go home with the person that brought you there. So you're right. Like, if this mentality got us here, let's not just change that just yet. It's a very fair point. Anything else you want to add about McLaren before we move on to their idols, the people they aspire to be strategy-wise?
No, I think that's it for McLaren.
The memes were going wild today about McLaren trying to be the new Ferrari in strategy. I don't have much to say for Ferrari that hasn't been said a million times. But how many times can Charles Leclerc attribute this to bad luck? You know? Like, is he always just unlucky, or is he ever going to blame himself for not getting into Q3, sparking this whole horrible weekend for him?
If it was truly a luck problem, Sainz would be suffering the same fate.
Exactly.
And now, people have tried to make a lot of the fact that Haas outqualified both Ferraris. and a Haas beat Charles Leclerc this weekend. And that is something, and Haas deserves a little bit of praise for doing that. But I'm not sure if you followed what they were doing with the cars in pre-practice.
No.
But basically they had an upgrade, or no, they didn't have an upgrade, sorry. They had two packages. They had the Imola spec car, and they had one of the other specs. I'm not sure exactly which one. Can't recall at the moment. But basically they gave each driver in FP1 a different spec car, and they went out there and they raced. Or no, sorry, it was an upgrade. Yeah, Charles had the upgrade originally, and Sainz had the Imola car. And what they were saying with the upgrade is that over 200 miles an hour, it would start to porpoise. So they actually went backwards. But the reason they kept it in there is because if it rained, the top speeds wouldn't be that high. So porpoising wouldn't be an issue because they wouldn't hit the point at which it starts to bounce. So basically they were hoping with this upgrade that they would end up with a wet race, and the car, when it was on the slower end, was a better car. And I can't recall exactly who ended up with what in the race, but that race was a bit of a shit show, worst case scenario for Ferrari in that case, because it was dry, then wet, and then dry again, right? Similar to what we saw in Canada. So it wouldn't have mattered which one they used. It would have been a compromise either way. And that is Ferrari again, just something's going on there. They don't understand what they have to do to get on top of that car.
And we said this a few weeks ago too. Like, I thought Vasseur was supposed to be that steadier of the ship. So how the hell, like, didn't they seem to get their head around it earlier this season? What the hell has changed? Is it the drivers not given the right information, which we know is a very distinct possibility? Or is it just I want, it's a terrible analogy, but monkeys with a wrench just hitting things and just hoping for the best, like in The Simpsons. Like, I don't know how many times you fucked this up. Sorry, I'm getting emotional, but like, I thought Charles was supposed to know what he was doing. I thought he was supposed to help with the upgrades. He's clearly not. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like to be the conspiratorial one, but for all we know, Sainz is sabotaging from the inside just to fuck with them.
That wouldn't surprise me, because we've alluded that he's the one given the right information. And now, like we talked about in Spain, when he's finally talking shit to Charles, it's like, you're right. Maybe this is his parting gift now. Like, I'm going to make sure this season's a living hell for everybody, except me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Sean. How do you sign him for 5 more years if he can't help you figure out this car? 3+2 or 2+3, whatever the contract is.
Yeah.
And how arrogant of him to have an exit clause. Oh, if the car's not good enough, I'm going to leave. Fuck you.
Let him leave. I don't know any other team that would take him.
Yeah, but then why sign him this year? Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, the ineptitude goes layers.
And I've said it before, the only reason he's there is the emotional Ferrari connection nonsense. It made no sense.
Yeah, you're right. What were we going to say?
No, that was it.
Oh, sounded like you had another point. The fans are guiding this decision because they love him. But like I said before, they loved Alesi in 95. They adored Alesi in 95. But did Alesi win you 5 championships? 6 constructors? He won you 1 race. 1 race. It's time to move on. But I could say that until I'm blue in the face. They won't listen. So fuck them.
I would argue that, let's see, 3 of Ferrari's top 4 drivers in history have been unpopular drivers with Ferrari. Right? Obviously, Michael is there, and Michael was well liked and loved by everyone because he won them 5 championships.
Mm-hmm. I'll add to that later, but yeah, go on.
So that's 1 of 5. Or sorry, 1 of 4. Then you have Prost, who wasn't well liked and was unceremoniously fired from Ferrari because he compared the car to a truck. But he won the championship.
Or came close.
You might have to.
No, he came
He
close.
came close, yeah. He came close and complained that the car was too much like a truck, and Enzo fired him.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Niki Lauda.
Oh, yeah.
Very unpopular because of his opinions of the car, to the point where he almost didn't start his career with Ferrari because Enzo Ferrari gave him, I think it was like a 2 or 3 week deadline. He was complaining about the car, and it may have been 1 week, whatever it was, before the start of the season. And he said, okay, you told me you can take whatever it is, 3 seconds out of the car. If you can't do that in Fiorano, the test track, before the season starts, you're not in the car. And he did it. And he won championships with Ferrari. And then he basically told Enzo to go shove the contract. And he went wherever he ended up. And then the third one is Gerhard Berger, who, it's a little before my time. I don't have a whole lot of background into it, but effectively the same thing. Like, he did well with Ferrari, but nobody really cared that he was there. It could have also been that the car wasn't super competitive and he was losing to Prost and Senna. But one of Ferrari's, let's say, better drivers overall.
He was that generation's Carlos Sainz. In the sense that he was really good, better than Alesi, but less popular. He won more races with Ferrari than Alesi did at the same time. They were teammates.
Right. So this just goes to that point of, you can't allow Ferrari to dictate who they want as their drivers just based off the emotion of who the driver is. Sometimes you need to actually pick a good driver. And maybe that's what Lewis is.
Oh, that's tough. Because he's going
That is tough because...
Sorry, go on.
No, I think we're going for the same point. He's going in there very emotionally charged.
Exactly, yeah. And popular. Yeah. And somewhat popular.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah. If he comes in on a high and makes comments, which he's not afraid to do, you and I call it a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of ungratefulness. Like at times, like the last couple of years at Mercedes, couple of years at McLaren, like, get your shit together, don't just lash out at the team. But if he uses that attitude at Ferrari and provides solutions, you're right, that is exactly what they need. Like, this sucks, here's how we fix it. Because that's what Michael did. So that's what Lauda did too.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael didn't have to deal with Enzo Ferrari. Mm-hmm. That's a bit of the difference. And that's where Hamilton may benefit from it as well. Michael was exactly like you said. He wanted it his way, and the team wanted him there, so he got his way. But at the same time, he was a worker. Mm-hmm. He put in work all the time and didn't stop. And another anecdote from Luciano Bruti. In the seasons that he was testing for him, they were testing an intermediate tire at Mugello, and Mugello's a fairly short circuit, but he was the first person to do a lap of Mugello under 1 minute on an intermediate tire.
Damn.
The next day, Michael was at Mugello just to beat his time. And he did it. So he flew overnight to Mugello, got in the car the next day in the rain on intermediate tires, and drove until he beat that time. Right? And I say that just to point out a potential difference between him and Lewis, because, yeah, Lewis knows what he wants and he'll fight to get it. But I'm not sure that Lewis has it in him to put that level of work in, especially when you hear things like he doesn't do simulator work.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah, we said this preseason. Like, Ferrari needs someone who's gonna do the work.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's a great story. I didn't know that about Michael. That's Michael Jordan shit. Because I was watching a video today on Michael Jordan. They were talking shit in the 92 final when he went up against Portland, against Clyde Drexler, who was a great three-point shooter. Clyde basically said, yeah, I'm going to beat Michael by shooting more threes. And Michael took that so personally. Game one, he only, the first, I think, 10 minutes, he only shot threes and hit 5 in a row. And like just stuffed it in their face. And Magic Johnson was commentating that game and basically said, like, he was looking at me every time he drained 3, because he told Magic before the game, yeah, I'm gonna light this guy up. Like, don't ever say shit about me. So that's funny that Michael Schumacher did the exact same thing. That's really funny.
And I don't necessarily think Michael did it out of spite, right? He did it basically to say, okay, well, if the test driver can do it, this guy who wasn't very successful in Jaguar or Prost, I should be able to do it. It's my car. I should be able to do it. And he did it. He went out there. Now, it may have been arrogant. It may not have been. We don't know. We never will know for sure. But from what everybody says about Michael, he was a very nice, very welcoming and hospitable person. So I doubt it was with any sort of malice that he went to Mugello and did this. But that just goes to show his work ethic and his character, that that's the level that he went to go out of his way when he didn't need to. All the data was there. They didn't need Michael's data. They didn't need him to beat that lap time by less than a second to get any relevant data out of it. But he did it for himself, basically, to say that he could.
Yeah, like if he, you're right. If he was arrogant, he was very good to hide in it. Yeah, it's just competitive people, competitive winners. They all seem to have that edge. Kobe Bryant was the same way. I guarantee Michael Jordan was out of malice. Anything else you want to say about Ferrari before we move on?
No. I mean, based on their performance in the race, I think we've talked about them long enough.
Yeah, fair. The slow car, if their car is good in a slow circuit, they might be a threat in Hungary, but we'll talk about that later, or I guess in another episode. Let's go to Red Bull. Max, once again, there when you needed him. I told you, and I told you earlier, and I texted you this. I genuinely thought there was a problem with this car, or there was a problem with this car, and then he's back in the discussion for the race win again.
Yep,
he's Super Max.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to say. I've said it before. He's not human. I think everything he does is calculated and very intentional. And you texted me that, and I was kind of scrambling, trying to see, did I miss something? We watch different coverage. So was something said on Sky that wasn't said on the F1 app or something like that? Piece of radio commentary? Nothing. So you sent me that, and I panicked for a couple minutes, and then realized it's just he wasn't on it at that point in the race. But then when the conditions started to change, it seemed to come to him.
Yeah, and I think it was either Karun Chandok or Ted Kravitz insinuated that Red Bull knew they had no hope in hell if it stayed wet. So they told Max, just wait this out, just do what you can until it gets dry, and then it'll be our time to shine. Just wear this out. So he seemed bad, or he seemed to be nursing a problem just because he was trying to keep the car together in the wet portion. So
yeah,
he did what he needed to do, and almost worked.
Yeah.
It didn't work for Perez.
Yeah, Checo.
God damn. You were right to tell me to shut the fuck up after Imola on this podcast. You were right about Checo's performance. You said it was one race. You're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
The point I was trying to make then was I said, you can't do this the rest of the season, especially if there's going to be what we thought then, one other team fighting with them.
Yeah.
Now there's two, and if Ferrari ever wakes up three, and Perez is nowhere to be found. Even worse.
Yeah. And that, I agree. I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days, and it really does come down to Imola was premature to say that he doesn't have it or he's having problems, whatever you wanted to say about him. But now, halfway through the season, it hasn't gotten any better. And the fact that he was out in Q3 due to nobody's doing but his own, and then went absolutely nowhere in the race, found himself lapped before anybody else.
Wow.
And him and Leclerc were in the same position, and they pitted early. Right? So people are trying to justify, okay, well, Perez was handicapped basically early on because they pitted him one lap too early or 2 laps too early, whatever it was, and his pace on the intermediate tire was absolute garbage. Well, I don't buy it because we've seen other teams make mistakes like that, and they don't just flounder at the back like Perez did. He went absolutely nowhere. He was fighting Saubers. Like, this is a Red Bull with someone who should be a better driver than that. Like we've been saying it for a couple of races now. He had podiums in mediocre hardware.
Saubers, Force Indies, yeah. Go on.
Yeah. And now he can't get a podium with race-winning hardware.
Yeah.
So something has to change, and it has to change real quick.
Yeah, and I think we alluded to it a couple weeks ago when they re-signed him, and we said, why so soon and why so long? You needed to light a fire under his ass, because that seemed to work last year. And
I think that's why they did
it. To light a fire, like to give him what he wants?
I think it was not necessarily to light a fire under his ass, but to say, hey, Checo, don't worry about it. Here's your contract. You're good. Go out there and get the result. And it just didn't work.
Yeah, like he had a slump at this point last year, but it was a lot of track limits, being clipped by other drivers, just unlucky shit, and he would still be in the top 10.
Right. He was fighting mid-pack, but he was scruffy.
Yes.
Now he's nowhere. He's non-existent. Hulkenberg has scored more points in the last 2 races than Sergio has in the last 5.
That's awful. Awful. Formula One philosophy does not support that.
No, Nick McKiley doesn't support that.
Yeah, I know. Have I said anything bad about Hulkenberg in the past couple months? He's doing his job now, and Perez is not. My head still explodes when I see people say, "Well, then Hulkenberg should get the Red Bull seat." I take a breath. I don't yell anymore. I don't scream and create a video saying that would be the fucking stupidest thing in the world. But Perez is not doing me any favors. Because, yeah, at this point, that would make more sense. And that's the stupidest fucking thing in the world at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see Horner follow through on what he said a few years ago, in that they're both Red Bull teams, being Red Bull and RB, and they have 4 drivers and 4 seats, and they can move them around as they see fit. I would love to see him follow through with that and say, we've mentioned it on this podcast before as well. Checo, go show us what you can do in the V-carb, and Yuki or Daniel, preferably Yuki, will come up to the Red Bull for a couple of races. Move him around, see what happens.
That definitely seems like his master plan for Daniel. Because as you say that, I think, okay, that would make sense then to sign Checo for 2 years to say, okay, I can move Daniel up. Because Checo...
Why? He's had his chance.
I agree with you. I don't think Daniel is the right... I would actually say out of the 4, Yuki makes the most sense at the Red Bull right now. But Horner has... And what Horner says is how it goes. It doesn't matter what the reality is a lot of the time. When Horner wants something, he gets his way. And if he wants Daniel with Max again, this is maybe making sense why he signed Checo for 2 more years way too prematurely. Just to sneak Daniel in, because he knew Checo would probably fuck it up.
Well, just to add a little bit more here, did you hear what's happening in 1 or 2 weeks?
No, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
In-season Pirelli tire test at Silverstone.
Oh.
So Horner has lined up Lawson in the Red Bull for a tire test at Silverstone. Does this sound familiar?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. To replace Daniel, to replace Checo. Do you think he probably wouldn't put him straight into the Red Bull?
Well, I don't even care to guess where Liam would go, but if we're reading between the lines, this is what they did to De Vries, right? Daniel got in that car at the Silverstone test in the current year's hardware and put in a time that was competitive with Max. Okay. So are they going to do that again this year? I mean, it's speculation. But if Lawson is putting in times that are a 10th off of Max's pace, which this year isn't that good. If you remember last year when Danny put that performance in, he was a 10th off of Max, which would have put him in P2 because Max had a great pole time. Mm-hmm. So a 10th off of Max this year for Lawson might not be that good because that would put him in what, 6th, 7th?
Yeah.
So the bar isn't necessarily set as high, but that doesn't mean Horner's not just pissed off enough that he won't do it anyway.
That lower bar might factor into his decision, though.
Might.
Yeah, so maybe If Lawson beats the time, then he'll be like, shit, I got to put him in there. Or maybe
That's a good point. Yeah.
or maybe what's his name? If Marco finds out about that, he'll say, you have to put Lawson in a car now. And they'll start another
I think
war.
at that point, Horner will just tell Marco to go fuck himself.
Completely agree with you. I'm just saying it might start another war between them.
It could. Yeah.
Fuck. Would you have thought 12 months ago that Red Bull would be in this mess? Like, it's nuts to think.
Which mess?
I know they're winning the constructors, they're winning the drivers' championship. I'm just saying they were so far ahead of everybody last year that in 12 months they seem like they're in disarray, right? But I guess you're right. Like, let's take a step back. I see where you're going with this, but yeah, go on.
Well, I think there is a bit of a mess, but it's not my opinion of it is it's not the one that you think it is. They have a mess in the fact that they've created a contract for a driver that isn't worth the paper it's printed on. And I say that for a couple of reasons I'll go into after, but the problem they have is they have 5 drivers, 4 of which, that's being generous, 3 of which show proper promise, 1 of which is probably worth another year or 2, and the other just needs to be let go. Let him join somebody else's team. And I think he'll come back in Perez. You know, if Perez were to go and spend some time at Williams, for example, I think he would show that he can probably perform better than he was at Red Bull.
Or Sauber with Hulkenberg. It's worked
Yeah,
before.
maybe.
It's worked before, yeah, to your point.
Yeah. Leave Danny where he is because, you know, like I said, he has decent enough performances time to time that he can justify it. And then let Liam and Yuki scrap it out for who ends up at Red Bull. And then put the one that loses in the RB. That's the mess that I think Red Bull is in right now. It's the one that they've been in for a number of years where they have too many F1 quality drivers and they don't know what to fucking do with them. Which is why at this point, almost half the grid is former Red Bull drivers.
Yeah, and it could be even more because didn't Isaac Hadjar win the feature race in F2? So I think it was Hadjar.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. After the penalty, yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It's just, I guess it's a good problem to have, sort of. But
yeah, I just wish that they would leverage that more. Like, they almost have the ability to corner the market on drivers and make more money off drivers than they do off of anything else. Right? Like we talked about it before, they could essentially do what they did with Carlos Sainz and just hire out drivers to other teams.
yeah. Yeah, they seem to have like a trigger finger. Like, yeah, like why not just loan Gasly all these years instead of just kicking him out? You're right. Like,
yeah, but even Lawson, like you don't have a spot for him, sure, but loan him out to Williams. You know, keep his contract and basically lease the contract to Williams and still have the option to take him back. Now, obviously, some teams aren't going to like doing that and will say no to it because they don't have the control. But for teams like Williams, where they're constantly scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to attract whatever funding they can, that might be the better solution.
yeah, like Sargent and Latifi didn't work out as paid drivers. Why not get someone who was an exceptional Red Bull junior? Have the contract.
Yeah, the difference is they're not pay drivers. They're probably more expensive than they're worth, but
Well, if their contract's paid by Red Bull, right? Is that
well, that you're still paying Red Bull for the rights to use that driver, right?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't, there's no way in hell they'd do it for free.
That's true. Oh boy. Thank God they have Max. Otherwise they would not, they would probably be fourth.
And you say that, And I just want to put it out there that really we're one incident away from them not having Max,
Huh.
right? And I'm not talking anything that's happening behind the scenes. We're getting to the point where these guys are fighting every race weekend with each other very closely. And yes, the cars are a lot safer, but if Max breaks an arm or a hand or a foot, Red Bull's done.
Yeah, it's happened. Schumacher broke his leg. You're not going to.
Danny broke his hand and he sat out 5 races, right?
Exactly.
Max can't afford to sit out 5 races.
Oh, hell no. Yeah, that's a very good point. They're on a knife's edge.
Yep.
Any thoughts on the midfield? We mentioned Haas, 2 good weekends in a row. I think we both saw them getting points. I didn't think they'd get this many points in Silverstone. I expected like a 10th for Hulkenberg, maybe even a 9th. Probably would have been a 9th if Charles, Checo, and George didn't DNF.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on.
No, sorry to cut you off, but Haas was another one that had some interesting upgrades. They brought a whole host of upgrades as basically almost a new car to Silverstone, but didn't run it until FP2 because they were worried about basically wrecking it in the rain. You know, giving it to Kevin or Nico and having him bin it.
Or Bierman.
So they held off. Yeah, sorry, Behrman in FP1, yeah. So they held off on putting it on the car, so they had limited data, or less data than they would have liked, I think. But that car performed really well. And again, it didn't have ultimate pace, like the same thing we saw in Austria, where Nico was up there, but the guy in front of him still had a pit stop on him.
Yeah.
Right. We saw that here as well, where Sainz took the pit stop advantage to put on soft tires and take the fastest lap. Right. So it's great. Haas is up there and they're fighting. They've made a massive stride this year. But clearly they're still lacking a bit of pace to the actual midfield. So they're fighting, they're punching with midfield, but they're really not in the fight.
Well, 2 points. One, that's been Nico Hulkenberg's career, though. He's able to get you in a good position, but he has no teeth to get more. He's never going to charge through the field. So he's doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
But this has always been the downfall of his career. 2, I'm going to give him kudos, though, because unlike last year when he would bring information to the engineers or Steiner, it wouldn't work. But clearly, with Komatsu and him, it is. The information Nico is giving is finally working. It's finally paying dividends. They're finally doing good upgrades, not going way backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that is historically what we've seen from Haas, right? They put an upgrade on the car and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And this time they've put the upgrade on and it seems to have done what they wanted it to do.
And you'll notice, once again, Kevin Magnussen nowhere to be found.
Right.
So he was never, ever the solution for Haas.
No.
Yeah. We have proof. Distinct proof. You texted me after FP2. And you're like, how the hell is Hulkenberg a second and a half faster than Magnussen?
Yeah, and you gave me attitude about it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we've talked about this before. I didn't believe you yet. I hadn't seen it from myself. I was like, we've seen this before. It's just practice. Let's not worry about it. And then the race came and qualifying came, and it's like, oh, Magnussen's garbage. Like, yeah, sorry. So I'm sorry for giving you attitude then.
Apology accepted.
Okay.
Just don't do it again.
I'll fuck off. Aston Martin back in the points. Who cares? Question mark.
Were they? I don't know that I believe that.
Stroll was 7th. Alonso was 9th.
So like Alpine territory.
basically. Stroll couldn't catch Hulkenberg, though, which you would think he could. He usually has in the past. This time he couldn't.
Right. But now they're in Alonso's car, so
Mm-hmm. Well said. And then Alpine, Sauber, Williams had a decent weekend. Williams believed they could have done more if Albon wasn't clipped lap one. Do you agree with that?
yeah, I didn't see a whole lot of the Williams this weekend. Um, I remember seeing the incident, but to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you how it went down. That's how uninteresting it was, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex was ninth.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So where was Alonso?
Eighth.
Eighth. Oh, shit. Sorry.
And Stroll was seventh. So they got 10 points as a team.
That's massive for them.
Yeah, but they got 0 last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And for a team that was supposed to be title contenders for the last 2 years, scoring 0 points with both cars finishing a race weekend is unacceptable.
Yeah, but you and I saw through that, so it's a moot point.
Yeah.
Williams, yeah. I hope I hope this snowball keeps growing, rolling down a hill. I really do. Sargent came 11th. Till a little too late.
Yeah. He's almost 10 seconds behind Yuki. And he did well in qualifying.
Better than
but,
usual.
Yeah, it's not happening.
No. I feel for him.
And we know he's not going to get the seat. He's not going to get the contract renewed.
No, Vowels and Wolf have basically said it. Yeah,
he's done there. There are some rumors though that he's been in talks with Prema, the F2, F3 team, to be a driver on their entry for Indy next year.
I saw that. Yeah, that makes sense for him.
It does, and he'll probably do all right.
He's a bright young kid. I feel for him. I really do, because he shouldn't have been pushed into that seat. He needed more time.
Exactly.
More time in F2 and more time to either develop into someone who can consistently win in F2, or I guess you only get one chance to win, but still, to win it, if he had a 1 F2, we could have talked about him in a different light. He would have had more options, and it's just, he was foisted in as a gimmick, and it just hasn't paid off. I really feel bad for him.
Yeah. That season where he was promoted, or where he ended up getting the contract at the end of the year, was basically just a shit show of who can get the first American driver, right? And that, I don't know why that was a storyline we all needed, but apparently that's the one that F1 chose, and it gave us a bullshit driver. So it shouldn't have been that way, and we should never be picking drivers to enter F1 based on where they're from.
Exactly.
But
this
anyway.
is a merit-based sport. Yeah, so as much as I pretend and joke otherwise, like Lewis Hamilton wasn't taken because he was British. He was British F2 champion. He was lighting up British F2, and he came in with a lot of hype and lived up to it. Like,
yeah,
we didn't just take him. Like, same with Lando Norris. Even as much as we hate to admit this, George Russell, they earned their spots. So, and especially when Americans don't do well in F1 historically. Don't just foist someone in, put all the pressure on their shoulders, and say this is for America. Like this, it's a lot to put on a kid.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, especially one that isn't necessarily used to being out there and being competitive and winning, right?
Yeah.
if you recall, it took a lot of effort for Williams to get Sargent the super license points. It basically came down to the final in Abu Dhabi, and he had to place, I forget where, but
Sixth.
it
I remember
wasn't,
that.
yeah, he had to place sixth in order to get the points that he needed to enter F1 the next year. And that's basically after Williams had shoehorned him into every single FP1 session that they possibly could.
Yeah. And I think he finished fourth or fifth that race. That's not a glowing endorsement.
No.
No. So.
No.
Poor kid. But anyways, he'll make a lot of sense in Prema in Indy. So we wish him well.
Yep.
I just hope for his sake. Well, I'd like to see it, but for his sake, I hope he doesn't get replaced mid-season. But that talk, that chatter is definitely picking up. So.
Yeah, but we've said it before. The kind of shit's just chatter. And yeah, I know it can sometimes move the needle one way or the other, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well, we're already sorry, go on.
No, I think if he does get replaced mid-season, it's going to be with another young kid, and that's just going to ruin that talent as well.
Antonelli, yeah. I'd like to see if Wolf is serious about Mick, have Mick replace Sargent for the rest of the season, but that may not help him either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. We're talking about the 2025 driver market now. We might as well add a few points. Apparently, Alpine really wants Sainz, and Sainz is leaning towards Alpine. But then Mercedes out of nowhere came back into the mix these last couple of weeks. Apparently, those same rumors that we cannot trust are also insinuating that Mercedes is not out of the picture after Wolff basically allegedly closing the door a month ago. So I think if you're Sainz, Mercedes still makes the most sense. It's just, how does Mercedes have that conversation with him and George? Because if Mercedes signs Carlos for 2 years, that's an awkward conversation with George. And if Sainz doesn't want a 2-year deal, then what does Mercedes do? It's really, Mercedes has put themselves in a weird position.
Yeah. And I can't really speculate. You know, Toto is a businessman, and so the chatter about the door being closed was all bullshit. It was people taking what Toto said and making it fit the narrative of Antonelli. All he said is that they're putting a lot of emphasis on Kimi for the future. He didn't say next year. Mm-hmm. Didn't say anything. Just Kimi is our priority to make sure he's ready and able to join F1 at the right time. That was the message that came out. I don't have his actual words in front of me here. But then, of course, the media jumps on it and makes it sound like Kimi's getting the seat. Well, no, that wasn't the case, but the media does what they do. So I think Toto is hoping that Mercedes is on the upswing, and they have the backing and the money and the history and everything else that they will be able to lure Sainz to them on Mercedes terms.
1 year.
Yes. And just because it's a Mercedes seat, they think Sainz will jump at it to get in there.
Which would make the most sense for him. If you're Carlos Sainz, that's where you want to go. But yeah.
It's where you want to go if you believe that their pace and their development is genuine and that they can be title contenders next year.
And you have a history of usurping the golden boy which
Yeah,
if they both have George on 1 year left and Carlos on a 1 year term, it's basically a shootout that season. And George will fuck it up and George will overstep.
agreed. Either way, I think Sainz doesn't get a renewal on that seat after a year.
And then you think it's Kimi and potentially Max Verstappen or Kimi and question mark.
George,
Oh, you think he's going to keep George other? Oh, you know what? You've talked about this. Toto's
yeah,
Toto's poor judge of character.
yeah. Which is actually a correction as well, because I had mentioned that Toto didn't bring Lewis in to Mercedes, which is not, I wasn't entirely wrong. Lewis didn't necessarily join because of Toto. Lewis joined because of Nicky Lauda,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a Toto acquisition. Toto was running the team at the time. So correct that from a few weeks ago.
Okay, well, still, that's his only correct decision. Bottas, too.
Yeah, but it took Nicky Lauda convincing Hamilton to come. He wouldn't have come on his own just because of the contract that Toto offered him. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
The thing about Sainz going to Mercedes is it's his one shot. It's basically a one shot qualifying for his championship hopes.
Yeah.
Sainz takes the Mercedes spot for 1 year in the hopes that, like you said, he usurps George and he takes the Drivers' Championship.
That's a lot.
If he doesn't do that, that's it. He's done.
At big teams.
Whereas,
or you think he's done in general?
He may get another seat, but he's going to be like Bottas. He'll just be racing to race. Whereas if he goes to Alpine, he genuinely has a chance at showing that he's multiple world champion quality. Especially if we're talking about an Alpine team that no longer wants to use Renault engines and is going to be potentially using Mercedes or Ferrari. He may stand a chance at pulling that team around him and creating another championship winning Enstone team, which I think is the long goal. And Sainz isn't that old. He still has plenty of years left in him.
He's 30, and that's at least a 4 or 5 year project.
Look at the rest of the grid. He potentially has 10 years left in him.
Yeah. But the ones who stayed on past 40 were all championship contenders or championship winners, except for Hulkenberg, which I've talked about a million times before, is insanity, but everybody...
I'm not sure that Hulkenberg is...
He's a year or two older than us.
Right, so he's not 40.
He's about to be, and he's never going away.
He's 36.
37.
36.
Is he our age?
He's August 19th, 1987.
He's 37.
He's the same age as Daniel Ricciardo.
I thought Ricciardo was a year younger than us.
Oh, shit, you're right. Yes, sorry.
Same with Perez, too, is a year younger than us.
Yeah.
If Hulkenberg will always have a seat, especially if Steiner comes back, they will drive his head in a jar with robotic arms. Him and Kevin Magnussen will be here no matter how bad they are. But I'm saying, like, most drivers hit 40, they've won a championship. Michael, about to be Lewis, that. Fernando. If Carlos doesn't win one soon, doesn't matter. Like, you fall off. You fall off even if you're if you're a championship winner. So
yeah. I'm not arguing that. I'm simply saying it depends on what Carlos's end game is. If he wants to be a one-time champion, his best shot is with Mercedes next year. if he wants to actually try and prove that he's worth the hype he's building around himself, he's got to take one of the other available seats and make it his own.
Yeah. I would
Right?
say.
Because,
Sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, if you have to look at all of those teams available, Alpine is not it. And I don't think he's good enough anyways. I would say Williams. If you have a long-term project in mind, that's more likely. They have the right infrastructure in place.
But they already have a driver that they're committed to a long-term development program with.
Doesn't that sound familiar? Charles Leclerc with Ferrari. He's been in that position before. Yeah.
But Alex has proven that he's actually worth something.
Yeah.
Alex has proven that he can at least help develop a team. Right? And don't get me wrong, I think a Williams with Alex and Sainz would be a great team. They could potentially bring Williams back to the top. And I don't think that's going to have a huge rivalry. I think they have a large respect for each other, and they're both personalities that can make that work. So I think it's a good option. I just don't know if I'm Sainz that's what I would want to do. I think I'd rather go to Alpine, who, based on their development this year alone, suggests that they're heading in the right direction. They've made a bigger step in 6 months than Williams has in 3 years.
Yeah. They also made a big step back that they shouldn't have.
Sure. Absolutely.
So it's interesting, yeah.
But look at Mercedes. Mercedes has made a massive step back for the last 3 years, right? Beginning of the season, the last 3 years has been miserable compared to where they ended the previous season.
That's a good point. So you're basically saying Alpine it's less far back. It's the road. It's the shorter road comparatively. Why would I purposely take a longer road if I'm Carlos Sainz? Because Alpine has a better head start.
Yeah, I think you're going to get a better short-term return at Alpine than you would at Williams. At Williams, for example, he might get, Alex has laid a bunch of the groundwork, so they might get to the top quicker, and they might stay there a little longer. But he has more glory to gain, let's say. If that makes sense. By going to Alpine and dragging them back to the top.
And that's what his hero did too. Fernando.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right. So if you take, I don't like the word, but if all these drivers are a little arrogant and egotistical.
Oh, you have to be in Formula One. Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
You have to have a little.
No, but that's just it. You have to have that mentality. So it is, do I go to this team and help this guy that's already started build up what's here? Or do I take this team that, shows some promise but is clearly far down the road and make them my bitch, so to say, and be the next Michael Schumacher?
Yeah, where would that leave Pierre Gasly?
Exactly where Pierre is.
I knew you were going to say
with
that.
A little bit of talent and a lot of arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If Carlos goes there, that's the end of Pierre. Yeah, go on.
Well, Pierre's got a contract, and I think Pierre's got enough skill that he can stay there for a few more years, maybe get another contract out of it. But I don't think he's Physicella type material, right? He's a good second fiddle, but he's never really going to put up too much of a fight.
Don't ever disrespect Giancarlo Fisichella like that again.
I love Fisichella. I love Fisichella.
I know. I love Fizzy too. It's just he won more races than Gasly. He had more podiums at worse cars. Everybody remembers him being 2 seconds slower than Fernando at Benetton, but that was his last couple years. And young Fisichella was way better than Pierre Gasly.
No, guaranteed. I'm not comparing them as their caliber of driver. I'm just saying Fisichella was nothing more than a second fiddle driver. Yes, he absolutely won races. It's the same thing with Mark Webber. Mark Webber deserved his spot there, but as we've talked about, he was never going to win a championship. Right? Mm-hmm. I think Pierre is in that level as well. He can control himself enough to not blow up his career like Ocon did.
Apparently not.
But ultimately,
yeah, but ultimately,
we'll see.
Ultimately, sorry, I hate interrupting you when you're in thought.
No, it's fine. Ultimately, he's not good enough to justify his ego from time to time. Put it that way.
And Ocon, if you believe the same rumors that Oliver Bierman was going to sign for Haas, the same people who spread those rumors are saying Esteban Ocon has already signed the contract for Haas.
Okay.
What a fucking stupid mistake that would be.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about last week, that's a good way to kill Ollie Behrman.
Mm-hmm. Ocon is the fucking herpes of F1. It doesn't matter. Like, he will just not go away. Like, no matter what you do, he will not go away. No matter how much it hurts to have him on the grid, he doesn't want to go away. That was a very, very harsh analogy, but I went there.
Yeah. One bad judgment call, and we're stuck with him for life.
Yeah, as you've said before, we could talk about 2025 until we're blue in the face. But until everybody signed, I think we gave a good enough opinion.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'd like to see Mick on that 2025 grid. Mercedes would make sense for a year. Just give him a chance to resurrect his career. But,
exactly. Especially if we're talking a year.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? It works into Toto's pet plan, right? Like, here's your chance. Prove yourself. And if not, then you're really done.
Yeah. And at that point, if they want to swap him out mid-season for Antonelli, fine. At least you've given Antonelli 1 year enough too.
Exactly. Right? I was thinking the exact same thing. Yeah. They could even leave that seat open and say, first half of the year is Mick. Go prove yourself. Second half is Kimi. They could do it. Half a year.
They could. I doubt they would, but
it would actually make more sense for Kimi, because then Kimi could get used to F1 at the end of 2025 and then come back strong for 26.
But if you're Mercedes, do you put your Constructors' Championship hopes on 3 drivers?
That's a good point. Very good point. It's assuming that you're not going to win the Constructors. Or assuming...
Right, but if you...
Sorry, go on.
No, but if you go into the championship assuming you're not going to win, you'll never win.
It's true. And I think if they end up finishing 4th this year, which looks unlikely, they're probably going to get 3rd. But if they do get 4th, that's when you do the 3 driver. And you say, okay, we're probably going to do the same next year. Let's just work on the future. But if they get 3rd, then then they have to... They would want to keep that money. They would want to keep that wind tunnel time, even though they get more in 4th. But it's pedigree. It's bragging rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Before we wrap it up, anything else you want to talk about?
F2 was good this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
So Antonelli won his first race.
A sprint.
But, yeah, it was a sprint race. And he qualified on sprint pole, which means he qualified 10th. Mm-hmm. Behrman was out of the sprint race. DNF. And the feature race, Behrman again was non-existent. He ended up far down the pack. Antonelli, I don't recall him doing anything spectacular.
He got clipped first lap. I was wondering by who. They never showed.
Yeah, that's right. He DNF'd in the feature race.
I hope it was Bierman.
It wasn't. They were too far apart. It was, who the hell was it? Colapinto or Bortoletto?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But second place, both races, was
the boy from Barbados. I saw that. At a boy.
So apparently he listens to the podcast because I gave him a bit of shtick and said he had probably peaked in the last episode. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back and he shows us what he can do. So the sprint, he wasn't too exciting. So he was second on the grid because he qualified ninth. And he was able to hold it, but that race was a bit of a shit show with the amount of rain that came down and red flags and safety cars. But he maintained his position, so I'll give him that.
Yeah, Antonelli ran away with that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, exactly. And the feature race, he started ninth, and he finished second, third on the road. But after the penalty, he was promoted to second. And he did some really nice overtakes. I think he gained 3 positions on the first lap.
Attaboy.
It was good. That was the Zane Maloney we saw at the beginning of the year, who got us so excited about him.
The overtaking.
So let's hope. Yeah, the overtaking.
The overtaking clinic that you said. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So hopefully we continue to see that from him, and he starts to claw back that lead. And then for Paul Aaron, it was kind of a miserable race. I'm pretty sure he finished outside the points.
In both, yeah.
He DNF'd in the sprint, I believe. Or no, he spun in the sprint, and that screwed him. And then, yeah, he, for whatever reason, I think he got hit in the feature race as well. So, not a great race for him, but he's still up there, so.
Yeah, he's very consistent, which is what wins F2, but still no sprint or still no feature race wins. He's got to get on that, I would say.
Yeah.
F2 is really exciting to the point where I'm actually thinking of getting the Formula One app or whatever that is that you buy, the one that's $70 a year. It's starting to seem worth it. F3 apparently was just a lot of fun this weekend too. So
yeah, F3 can be pretty good sometimes too. So, most of the time I don't have enough time to actually watch it.
There's a Mansell in F3.
Yes. Grandson.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
All right. I think we hashed it out pretty good this week. There's now a 2-week break until Hungary. And we'll be back in probably a week or so to give our predictions and hopefully talk about some more news. But yeah.
Yep.
F1_philosophy at Instagram. Please follow, share, like our posts. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. Don't let your bitch wife stop you from watching us. And F1philosophypod at gmail.com to join the fantasy league. I'm not going to give up. There's still half a season, but yeah, it's not looking good. Just keep winning to stop Gatsby, Sean.
I'll keep waiting to stop you as well.
Okay. Well, you saw my bluff. You saw through my bluff. All right.
Always.
What did we learn today?
Not to trust Nick?
Never trust Nick. I might make that the title of this episode.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. Bye, everyone.